Hello once again, guys. Today we will introduce some scientific notions that will be used in the field of heredity and Mendelian genetics. First of all, as we studied before, that genetics is the study of transmission of traits coded by genes from one generation to another. Study of genetics can either be autosomal or gonosomal. The autosomal cases can be studied at the monohybridism level, showing lethal alleles, complete dominance, and incomplete dominance, which can be codominance or intermediate dominance cases, and it can show the presence of lethal alleles if they are existing. However, in the case of dihybridism, autosomal can be either independent or linked, and linked dihybridism can be partial or complete linkage. Concerning the gonosomal cases, these are also can be studied as monohybridism case and dihybridism, which which can be linked genes or the case of independent genes with other pair of chromosomes of an autosome. So, as we said before, if a gene is a certain locus located on a chromosome pair, which one of them is paternal and the other is maternal, these genes can be linked. They are located on the same pair of chromosomes, or it can be independent if they are carried by different pairs of chromosomes. Also, the terms homozygous, which is pure, or heterozygous, which is a hybrid case, or it is what it's called also F1, can give the case of carrying two alleles having the same traits, while heterozygous alleles can be shown by different alleles carried by the same pair of chromosomes. However, dihybridism can be independent or linked, but linked genes, whether they are absolutely linked or partially linked, can be located in cis positions or in transposition. In cis position, both dominant alleles are carried in the same chromosome, while in the transposition, a dominant allele is linked to a recessive one on the same chromosome, and each of these cases gives different results while hybridizing individuals. Of course, as usual, we are considering capital letters for dominant alleles and small letters for recessive alleles. Also, genotypes versus phenotypes can be represented as schematic representation on chromosomes like this case. If an individual having two capital letters alleles carried by autosomes which have the same length or shape, the genotype representing this schematic representation can be capital A, while the phenotype will be capital A in brackets. However, if O is recessive with respect to A, the schematic representation of the chromosomes of this genotype can be carried by a pair of chromosomes which have the same length, one carrying a locus having capital A, and at the same level, another allele, which is small o, is carried on the other chromosome. Its representing genotype will be capital A, small o, and the phenotype will be capital A between brackets. So this phenotype will show that this blood group of this person will be A, although he has allele O, which is recessive and masked by the dominant allele capital A. Also for capital A and capital V, which they are codominant, so their genotype will be capital A, capital V, and the phenotype will express both characteristics of capital A and capital V and will be capital A, capital V between brackets. Okay. Now let's consider the general rule of having different crosses. All crosses among organisms can be either pure cross, which is uh, the hybridization of a homozygous dominant with the homozygous recessive, a self-cross, which is the hybridization between two heterozygous individuals, and a test cross, which is called also back cross, consisting of crossing between heterozygous and homozygous recessive. Let's take this example. In the case of monohybridism, a pure cross can be represented by this figure. If we see here, we have a male having this characteristic, which has a brown body, crossed with a female having an orange body, and all their offsprings were having brown body only. Because this cross was taking into consideration one genetic trait, then it is the case of monohybridism. And because this cross gave uniform offsprings of two different parents, then this cross will be a pure cross. And the pure cross also gives or shows the dominant characteristic or dominant allele. So in this case, the dominant allele will be the brown one, and the recessive allele will be the orange one. It's the pure cross. How about the self cross? In the case of self cross, we cross two Drosophila having brown body, but the offsprings are brown except for some orange ones. In this case, we we can see that we have four orange Drosophila in their offsprings and 12 brown Drosophilas, which constitute three-quarter of the offsprings, and one quarter of the other one quarter of the offsprings will be orange. So these results are represented by the case of self-cross. So self-crossing gives results 75% to the dominant phenotype and 25% for the recessive phenotype. It's also the case of monohybridism. What about the case of test crossing? As we see in test crossing, we crosses we cross Drosophilas having two different characteristics, yani one having brown body and the other will have the orange body, and half of their offsprings will be orange and the other half will be brown. So this cross will be a test cross, and these parents, one of them is heterozygous, which is the brown one, expressing the dominant allele, and the other will be homozygous, expressing the recessive allele, because the recessive allele is carried only in the homozygous state. Concerning the independent genes, in the case of self-crossing, both parents have the same genetic traits or phenotypes, expressing the same phenotypes. However, These Drosophila have four different offsprings, phenotypic offsprings. For Drosophila having the characteristics or the phenotype of dominant alleles. These heterozygous Drosophila gave these offsprings. It is the case of self-cross. If we pause this or take a screenshot for these offsprings, we will see 18, 18 Drosophila having the phenotype of their parents, which are these ones. And since it is the case of dihybridism, we are considering the color of eyes and the color of their body. So 18 will have brown eyes and brown body. And this characteristic or this phenotype with red eye and uh, orange body is found in two copies only, while 6 will have this characteristic with brown eyes and orange body, and another 6 having red eyes with brown body. And it is the rule that uh, all the offsprings of independent genes having self-cross will give the results of 9331. 9 having the dominant phenotype, and both three phenotypes, one of them is being dominant and the other will have the recessive allele, and only one bi-recessive individual over 16. So the results will be 9 over 16, 3 over 16, 3 over 16, and 1 over 16. It's the rule, and we should be memorizing them. Concerning the test cross of independent genes, as usual, the test cross will give four different phenotypes in their offspring. Now I am counting them, and these four different phenotypes, which were apparent in previously in the self-cross, they are here, but they constitute 25% each. So among these 32 Drosophila, 8 Drosophila will have each of the different phenotypes. And because it is a test cross, it was the crossing between a hybrid Drosophila having the dominant phenotype and a birecessive Drosophila which have the recessive phenotype. Recessive phenotype carrying the red eyes and the orange body. Okay, you can count them and you will see that four equal proportions in the offsprings of test cross independent genes are obtained. On the other hand, as for the linkage cases, the absolute linkage will give in the test cross cis in this position, the test cross having the same phenotype as that of the independent genes, but the offsprings will give 50% having the dominant phenotypes linked together, having brown eyes and brown body, and the other 50% will be having the recessive phenotypes having red eyes and the orange body. It is the cis case of absolute linkage. However, the trans case of absolute linkage will give different results, which are 50-50, also as usual for all test crosses, but the one dominant allele is linked to a recessive one, and the recessive allele for eyes is linked to the dominant one for the body. Okay. As for the case of partial linkage, in cis position, most of the Drosophilas will be